Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські Російська поліція справи заводить, та вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод. Слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt. And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 686 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And today, we got some shocking news about those Russians. Can you believe that? I'm telling you. And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And we're also going to be talking about that title tonight because I'm not kidding. Apparently, a shocking report has been uncovered by a partisan or some Ukrainian intelligence forces that were able to take pictures of the document, and it's showing that Russian forces along the Kherson area or the Dnieper River are in incredibly bad shape, literally almost at the point of disintegration. We'll be getting to that here in a second because we have a lot to talk about tonight. I mean, not just that, there's a lot of things that have been going on around not just Ukraine, but around the world. Many of y'all have been hearing about what's going on inside of Ecuador at the moment, and a lot of y'all have actually been requesting that we include that as a special news segment. Sadly, at the moment, it doesn't appear that there's enough video or picture evidence coming out of the region for us to be able to make a specifically tailored news segment about what's going on there. We can tell y'all that the cartels apparently are going out of control, and the Ecuadorian government has now declared that the military is going to be used in emergency actions against the cartels. So it appears that there may be armed conflict going on in Ecuador in between the pro-cartel and pro-government forces, probably within the next few days. Moving on.
I did hear that the gang members that went in and took over that TV station, they've apparently been arrested and raided. The police did get in there and get them out. So that was the thing that everyone saw on the internet and also on TV, was that raiding of that news station. So apparently they got that under control. But the bandits are still running loose across the country, just causing havoc for no reason that I can tell.
Man, it's honestly crazy to think about, but we'll be making sure, if y'all want to hear about it, to try and come up with a specialized news segment, maybe for tomorrow. But that's something that y'all can tell us about in the chat tonight. Do y'all want to hear about news outside of Ukraine again, like in Ecuador, in other situations around the world? Because we can cover it. But moving on from that, we also are starting to hear that tensions are beginning to rise in the Middle East again, specifically in between the Israelis and the Hamas and Hezbollah forces within the Gaza Strip in southern Lebanon. We have started to hear that the Israelis are conducting bombing campaigns in southern Lebanon against Hezbollah forces there. We also heard that a British Type 45 Daring-class frigate engaged Houthi forces today off the coast of Yemen as they were launching more drone attacks on commercial shipping. We also heard that the Iranians are apparently starting to get a little bit more active in the region and suffered one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in Iran's history, with nearly 130 killed today. We also heard that tensions are continuing to rise in the Korean peninsula, as South Korea has now said that they are no longer respecting the maritime borders that were laid out due to the I believe it was the ceasefire treaty, and they will now be conducting live-fire artillery exercises right along the demarcation line that spans all the way out to the islands furthest out here, which is called Byeonmyeon. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Nevertheless, tensions are continuing to rise around the world, and we are starting to see some very interesting trends in multiple other areas outside of Ukraine. Of course, I'd like to make it clear that we are going to, of course, keep Ukraine as the focal point and focus of this channel and continue to cover it until the war ends. But if y'all would like to hear other news, like in Korea, the Middle East, or even in South America, including the situation that's been going on with Venezuela and Guyana, let us know. I would really love to know, because if y'all would like to hear other news, I would love to be able to research it and start delving into other topics of news outside of Ukraine. Although our loyalties always lie with Ukraine and making sure to see them through till the end of the war. Moving on from kind of the overview of everything else that's going on around the world right now, it's time for us to get on into the major news of the night, which is that damning report that's here inside of Ukraine. And this comes from an area that has been a serious focus here on this channel and a serious focus for many military analysts around the world, which is the left bank of the Dnieper River. Really the only area that many military analysts are starting to say that any significant progress could potentially be made by Ukrainian forces. This area is lightly defended by Russian forces. The Russians had to raise a brand new VDV division and move it into the area just for the hopes of trying to hold this place down against a further Ukrainian attack moving south from Krunki and Kazachi Lakri, and it appears that the VDV division may be the only one that we understand of at the moment that is at least somewhat cohesive. Another one of these units is actually based near the Alesky area and may actually be garrisoned within the city of Alesky itself, and that is the Russian 26th Brigade. And based off of a damning report that came out today from the Russian military itself, it appears that there are some very serious, best way to say it is, behavioral or order issues within the unit. What you're seeing right here is a part of the spreadsheet that was issued by the 26th Motorized Rifle Regiment further up the chain of command to Russian commanders that would be able to try and assess the situation and the combat effectiveness of this unit if it was to be put into direct action against the Ukrainians. Now, this doesn't really say a lot for us in Russian, but when we get the English translation, we're starting to see a very interesting story. But let me go over here because this is actually the large one. But we can see here that this title of the sheet is Groups of Enhanced Psychological Attention, One Motorized Rifle Company. And also it goes through different folks. It goes through their job title, military rank, and where they are, or more so their actual name, and then it says what's wrong with them and what kind of recommended corrective actions are supposed to be taken against these soldiers. So starting off with our first guy, he is a gunner, an operator, so I'm guessing he's a gunner on an APC. He's a private called Sansar Konsbayevich, and it says that he tends to uncontrolled consumption of alcoholic beverages while performing official combat duties. So we know that this guy is a raging drunk, which is nothing new for the Russian army, but it appears that apparently the recommended corrective measure for this guy is daily behavior monitoring, and also servicemen for tracking behavioral dynamics. I don't know what the rest of that means, but I know the first part means that they're going to be keeping an eye on this guy, apparently, and that's all we could get out of this one. But we can see that apparently the next guy is actually a grenadier, probably in an infantry unit. He's also a private, but it also appears that he tends to dip into the drink a little bit extra. And it seems that this might be a bit of an issue. So they say that
he's a devil for the drink, Kathleen. He's a devil for the drink.
What about Terry? Terry's just a devil for the drink. He's not an alcoholic, but nevertheless,
he's flamboyant, Kathleen. Just flamboyant.
But nevertheless, they once again recommend for this guy the same thing that they had for the first guy, Matthew. They say just keep an eye on him. No real punishment.
That's about all you can do at this point, because the Russians got to have whoever they can get. So, if they're drunkards, you just got to work with it, I guess. But that's the sad state of the Russians.
Apparently so. And this guy here, apparently his job title is called a calculation number. Don't know what kind of job he's got. But nevertheless, apparently he's prone to some behaviors that will end up not suiting him too well on the front lines. So they say to just keep an eye on him. Once again, the recommended action is daily behavior monitoring. Every answer is daily behavior monitoring. I have a feeling that this command has very little control over the unit because they're not taking any actual corrective actions against any of this stuff. It's just keep an eye on them. That's the answer to all of it. But nevertheless, the list just goes on. Mostly alcoholics on the list. We can once again see the actual print. We can see the translation. Actually, I forgot to mention this. This is actually further down on the list. This is the next group down from this one right here. But once again, when we move further down the list, we can see that every single one of them on this sheet is an alcoholic and having serious issues with drinking while on the front lines. A very serious issue for Russian forces. And it looks like, once again, no actual punishments being made. It's just daily monitoring of behavior. So overall, ain't going well for him. Not going well for them all. And this guy's actually a sergeant. So he's a little bit higher up there.
What are they going to observe at this point? Because they're already crazy. They're already drunk. What are they going to do? Keep writing in the chart? He's still crazy. Day 2, he's a little bit more crazy. Day 3, he's still crazy. It's like nothing's going to change. Why observe him?
Dude, they're sitting there. He's drunk. Looks back up from the desk and sees he's still drunk. Day 2, still drunk. It's like, well, you're not really doing a lot to fix it, are you? But moving even on further down the list, y'all aren't going to believe it. More alcoholics. Literally just an endless stream of alcoholics in this unit. And it doesn't end. We're now down to soldier number 25. They're still alcoholics. Apparently only one guy was showing some kind of a life-ending tendencies. Everyone else is just getting lost in the sauce. And it begs the question, where the hell are they even getting this much alcohol for everyone to be some kind of a, to be an alcoholic like this? I don't get it, because to be an alcoholic like these guys are, because we know how much the Russians drink, and it's exorbitantly high, and it's mostly hard liquor. How in the world are they getting enough liquor to everyone in this unit for everyone to be a raging alcoholic? Even on the front lines. I have a feeling that withdrawal would probably be more common on the front lines than actually being an alcoholic, but it's the opposite for the Russians, especially the 26th Motorized Rifle Regiment. And the picture,
they have to keep the Russians intoxicated, because if they're actually sober, they might decide, I don't want to go and run into battle and die, and I might need to turn around and rebel. So they got to keep them, screwed up.
I think what we call that, Matthew, here in America, in the legal terms, is inebriated.
Yes, inebriated, in a bad way, or snockered, or snootful.
But the Ukrainians rejoice. For these people are dog
Indeed.
drunk. And speaking of which, they really rejoiced today because we got to see that the Ukrainians were able to destroy another BMP today on the northern end of Krenki. From what we're starting to see again, the Russian VDV division that is based most likely out of Korsunka, and I'll show y'all where that is. So Korsunka is about right here, on the very eastern end of Krenki. We're assuming that this VDV division is either based out of Korsunka itself or in a village further down, maybe Obrivka or Maslivka or Pishchani, just as a couple of options. But nevertheless, it appears that this division is continuously trying to conduct offensive efforts back into Krenki from the northeastern side of the village and attempt to push the Ukrainians out that way. Doesn't appear that they're succeeding because they did lose another BMP today, and we are assuming that these losses are going to be attached to the Russian VDV division that is based out of this area of the battlefield. When you see our BMP trying to skirt along the very edge of the forest, getting out of the village, when you see some pops of some explosions in front of them, and when you see the BMP firing, we actually see it's a BMP-2 firing rapidly as it continues to move out of the city and further north and east. We see the BMP continuing to race on along. And we can finally see the BMP get hit.
Smoked.
Smoke. You know, I wonder, Matthew, is this an ad that says smoking kills? Because I think in this case it does. Anyways,
You see, it wasn't the smoke that got him. It was the bomb.
man, I'm telling you what, man, Oppenheimer would be proud of you for putting out that line right there. But that's the
Like Jeremy Clarkson always said, speed doesn't kill you, but stopping fast does kill you.
That's actually a pretty smart statement right there. That's entirely true, actually. But still, moving on from that clip and on into our next one, we also got to see our boy Madyar, boom, chaka chaka, boom, chaka chaka, hitting Russian forces. Check it out. This is a very lengthy clip, though, so we may only show parts of it, but I will show y'all the very beginning of it for sure. By the way, this is no normal BMP. This is actually a BMP-3. This would most likely be assumed to not be a VDV APC. The VDV usually uses BMDs or earlier version BMPs like the BMP-2 or the BMP-1 from what we've been able to tell. This BMP-3 is probably attached to another unit, maybe even the 26th Motor Rifle Regiment that is in the area right now. And we see the drone trying to line itself up for the driver's hatch. Also, a cool thing I forgot to mention about this, y'all will probably find this very interesting, is that the BMP-3 actually has 3 hatches in front of the turret. Usually on a BMP-2, there would only be 2, and they would be over here on the right side of the BMP in the video. And these would be for the commander and the driver. The gunner would still be inside of the turret. And then later on in the BMP-2, they actually moved the commander into the turret, and then he just remained there throughout the modification. So in the BMP-3, the commander and the gunner are still in the turret. The driver is actually centrally located right here in the center hatch. And that's something I actually incorrectly stated just a moment ago, because these 2 spots, the one to the right and the left, are actually crew positions for infantrymen that are being carried by the BMP-3. So it's pretty interesting to see how the BMP-3 is designed, because it's very bizarre. You don't get something like this on a Bradley, but you do get this kind of stuff on a BMP-3. But anyways, getting back to the video. See the drone trying to line itself up on the right side hatch. Oh, and this thing's still smoking.
Ну, та й для тих, хто поспішає, результат нездорового паління. Попереджають, паління небезпечне.
And it looks like that's the remains of that BMP-3 a little bit later on in the day. So it was completely destroyed.
У околицях Кренків. Друга доба, як хробак бездумно не пхається.
See the drone coming on in.
Розуміючи, що гарно видно, самий час позачищати всі недопалки хробачі. Ну та й в'йо, дірок.
That's a big boy drone too. That's kind of hefty.
Пілот спокійно
Yeah. And we see it trying to drop itself gently, and it did, right into the hatch. And now we can see a fire brewing up towards the front part of the crew compartment. And it appears that a second drone's coming in to help continue to kindle the flames.
Допрацьовувати цю ББМ-ку зараз не варто, треба дочекати, щоб вона гарно розгорілася. Тим більше поряд стоїть ще купа техніки, що треба допрацьовувати. Тож, далі коротенька пряма мова пілотів і працюємо по наступним недопалкам.
You see them showing the smoking BMP-3, and that black smoke coming out of the hatch is showing us that this BMP-3 will burn down. It's only a matter of time and oxygen.
Ні, може треба. Так, що не дарма був, не знищено.
Я зараз поміняємо статус.
Але я хочу додати сюди. Але горить, бач? Злюка, вогонь.
You see them continuing to observe the BMP, and we're going to skip forward now because the rest of this is really just showing the same burning BMP. So we're going to skip forward to this one because this actually shows Madiar going for a BTR series APC. Pretty neat. And we see that this one pulled off on the side of the road, and apparently they either tried to camouflage it or it ran over a tree. But the drone's trying to line itself up for the perfect hit.
Чекали на нього патик різних, сміття, щоб ускладнити вхід. Але пілотів то не сильно переймає. Бульк очима пілотів та їх емоції.
I think that drone just plummeted into the ground or something.
Oh no, it hit. And fires immediately started on the BTR, and it is brewing up quick.
Засобу. Тепер він гарненький, біленький, симпатичний такий, як має бути.
Someone sounded like they were singing a song back there. They're like, in the mist, in the beaches. But anyways,
Дивимося ззовні.
moving on from that little clip. And we can see the BTR continuing to burn. The BTR is actually burning at a faster rate than the BMP-3. Very interesting.
Що курило через дуло. Не бачив.
And we see the burned out BMP-3 later on. We didn't get to see it explode on film, but we got to see the wreckage, which is proof of its destruction.
Але
So moving on to this next clip,
залишалися досить
we can see that
сіленько.
Could
apparently
Mandiar be actually saying in Ukrainian? He could be saying, and here we have a tank. We're going to blow it up with a bomb, a big boom, explosion, scar marks on the ground. He's saying a lot of stuff. Like, be looking at a very simple video. I'll be very curious to know what he's saying.
dude, I bet you it's going to be something like, "Welcome to Dark Dunks, number 15, the burning BMP."
Oh yeah.
This BMP is absolutely incredible. The way it burns so fantastically. Some may wonder, why in the world does it burn like this? Or something like that. But anyways, he's going back in time. He's showing the BMP-3 again a little bit later on. And we can see another, that is actually, I would not believe it, that is a literal T-55 from right after World War II. This is probably one of the first ones we've seen as well. You can tell by the distinct round shape of the turret. Many Soviet main battle tanks, in fact, all of them have this perfectly round-shaped turret, at least the basic structure of it. But this one is very noticeable because most later Soviet main battle tanks had much wider turrets. While they were still perfectly circular, they extended over the track segments. And this one does not do that. So we can tell this is a T-55 that just got knocked out.
Пропарювання дірки, а вон FPV-ха фільмує зовсім поряд. Відклала та й контролює. Буде повторчик. Обов'язково. Одного мало. Допоки в танчику цукерок робить свою роботу.
We see him showing the burning T-55
Буханець
still.
загрильований намалювався. Ну, та з тим клопоту
We see him
не
pointing
буде.
out a little truck over here with what looks like a wishbone. Like it appears that the driver's antenna has been switched for a wishbone. But we're going to end the clip here because it is still another 8 minutes long. And I don't want to hold y'all on this for too long. I just want to show y'all a little bit of what Madiar's birds have been doing in the area. And if y'all really liked it, make sure to go down into the description below, click on the link to the day 686 map, and go check it out for yourselves. It's near the area of Krunki in the southern direction of Kherson. You can easily find it. It's marked in maroon, which is today's color. Thursdays are always maroon, so you'll be able to find it right there for yourself. But moving on out of that news, I want to quickly take us into Russia for a little moment. Because many of y'all have always heard the stories about how the Russians are wishing that the Europeans would freeze to death over the winter because they no longer have Russian gas. All of y'all know that weird little ad where they ate the hamster and all that crap. You know, the Russians wish that the Europeans would freeze to death and die. That's just generally a thing that they look forward to on almost a yearly basis at this point. But in the area of Tver, just north of Moscow, and funnily enough, I'm actually going to bring y'all way back to the middle of last year. Well, actually, it was more like August, but just north of Tver, in the town of Budovo. Y'all know what happened right here in this field?
What happened?
That's where Prigozhin's private jet went down and he died. Right there in that field, just north of Tver.
I bet it's haunted. You know what? I was about to say something else, but I remember on stream you can't say that.
Man, he's probably sitting out there. You go out to that field, and on a very quiet night, you can hear "Shoigu." It's just like, oh man, the spirit lives on of a war criminal. But anyways, moving on from that little side note, because I just had to remind y'all how long y'all been here and how much of the war we've seen pass. We saw a warlord rise and fall in the entirety of the length of this war, and we got to see the entire thing unfold, and that was where that story ended, right there in that field near Budovo. That is really wild when you think about it, but what's even more wild is the fact that in a city like Tver, which is actually considered one of Russia's nicer cities, if you can call it that, I'll show y'all some pictures of it. Here's some pictures of Tver. Honestly, man, that kind of looks like the Regents building in Montgomery. Like, I'm not lying. That looks a lot like it. Like, a little bizarre. But here's what Tver looks like. While this doesn't look great, this is actually considered not a bad city in Russia. Y'all have not seen anything terrible yet. We can, of course, see some war memorials, and we can see what I would say is probably a normal-looking building in Tver. It looks pretty worn out, old, and tired. A lot like Putin. But beyond that, Tver is considered a somewhat nicer town. And the reason why I keep pointing out that it's a somewhat nicer town is that you would think that with a nicer town like this, the amenities that you would be able to find here would be good, and you would be able to live a pretty comfortable life. Well, that's not necessarily the case. The military, on the other hand, is living quite a nice life, because this is where one of the airlift wings is based out of for the Russian Air Force, where I think it's an entire strategic airlift wing of IL-76s are based, and you can actually see those here on satellite picture, all lined up on the tarmac. But outside of that, and also, I believe these are some Antonov. I don't know what Antonovs these are. We'll have to come back to that a little bit later. But beyond that, while the military is living nice, and while you'd think this is a nice place, the people of Tver are not living good lives right now, because unlike the fantasies where the Russians wish that the Europeans would freeze to death, the Russian city administration of Tver, and also some parts of Moscow, have dropped the ball so badly, gas is not being provided to large districts of each city, and people are literally freezing to death as we speak. A video came out today. It was a appeal from the citizenry begging for the city administration to somehow get the gas back on. And also at the beginning here are some pictures of the thermometers in these buildings, and these are, of course, are measuring in Celsius. So it's not, like -32 here. In case of your European viewer, this is, a normal measurement for you. And here in America, this would be equivalent to about 33 degrees Fahrenheit inside of your apartment building where these little thermometer pictures were taken. But we can see one right there, and we see another one right there. That's actually 10 degrees Celsius, so that's like in the low 40s in Fahrenheit. But anyways, dear Vladimir Volodymyrovich Putin, we residents of house number 10 on Moskvaya Street in the village of so-and-so are forced to turn to you for help, since before this we already appealed to the governor Igor Rudna and to the head of the district, Alexei Mikhailovich Plyaskin, and this did not give any result. The problem has not been solved. We are actually being killed with the cold. This is some kind of torture and extermination of the population 100 kilometers away from Moscow. We are simply freezing from the cold. We don't seem to have any fighting here, but we live like in besieged Leningrad. The entrance is completely iced over. The whole house is without heating. All the radiators blew up. We see ice is formed on the floor in the apartment. That's how cold it's gotten overnight, is that there's still solid ice on their floors. And we can also see the busted out radiator right there that would have provided the heat, but it's not. I bet you can see why.
I don't know why this lady thinks that making a video directed at the president of Russia is going to fix their heating problems.
Well, probably because they have no one else to turn to, because from what it sounds like, they probably have reached out to the mayor, then to the governor of the oblast, and then the last guy left on the chain is Putin himself. So they probably failed at every other end to get anything done, and now they're all just sitting around freezing, and their last hope is to beg the literal president of the entire nation to switch out their radiators, or at least get the heating working again.
Yeah, I mean that's unfortunate because of the kids and the families in here. Like, hopefully it gets fixed for them as they're just citizens. But at the same time, it's like it's not like Putin's going to come down and be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry about your heating. Let me get that fixed for you." It's like, that's like such a small fry issue. He's not going to come down and do that. And if he does come down, he's probably going to level the place.
Yeah, I mean, like I think Putin has bigger issues to deal with, like who's going to conduct the next coup and what's going on with the war. Like, I think he's probably thinking about those a lot more than these people, because, to be honest, the Russian citizenry falls at the very bottom of the priority list for the Russian government. That's why they're making this video in the first place. But getting back to the video, now we're simply freezing. In our rooms, the temperature is +4, +10 degrees, while it's -30 outside. In order not to die, we heat ourselves with everything we can. When each apartment has several heaters and heat guns, we don't sleep at night so that, God forbid, a short circuit occurs and we all burn out. People are warming up. The city of Electrostal. Putin, tell us, is it fair that all the officials responsible for this are now sitting in their warm and cozy homes, and we, our children, the elderly, are afraid of freezing to death? We're not asking for much. We just want to live in normal conditions suitable for people. Putin, hear us and help us. Dude, they said that at the end like it's almost a prayer to Jesus. they were like, hear us and help us. He's not hearing you and he's not helping you. But I think this is a very important thing to know, because while I put the marker down in Tver, I'm sure y'all heard that this is actually something that's going on in many different cities across the area. Practically everyone is having issues right now with heating inside of Russia. And I have a feeling that this is going to start causing either a lot of hospital visits and end up overwhelming the medical infrastructure in Russia, or a lot of people are going to end up freezing to death and dying, which is also going to be a very serious ordeal for the Russians to try and deal with going forward. But things just are not going well for them. And I have a feeling that is probably only going to be getting worse as the winter months continue to go on. The Russians can probably expect a reprieve around late February, early March, because that's when the temperatures start to rise again. But for now, they are in very tough straits, and the Russian government is probably not going to help out these people whatsoever. On top of that, inside of Moscow, we've heard that apparently there's rumors coming out that the Russians are in such short supply of finely machined items, such as bolts, that they're now asking people to go out into the scrapyards and go look for Japanese-made bolts. The specific kind.
Well, they're smart for that, at least. They know to go find the Japanese ones, or the Japanese or German ones will work, because I'm sure they're well made. They're both precision.
And look at this. This is just weird. This is what it says on the Telegram post right here in Russian. But we're going to go to the English one so that way I can make sure to read it off perfectly. But it says, Chronicles of a Madhouse. That's the caption to it. In Russia, volunteers collect Japanese bolts and nuts for the front from landfills. Volunteers published a request of Buryatia, Baikalia, there we go, and the Irkutsk region. They asked to collect bolts and nuts for a service station in Taganrog at auto dismantling yards. Why Japanese? Because store-bought parts come off, burst, and are not suitable for repairing equipment. After all, the sanctions are not even 5 years old, and it's no longer possible to do with normal bolts and nuts. And Chinese bolts, like cars, are obviously not very good either. And what this is really telling us is that the Russians are not able to find finely machined parts. And I know that a lot of people consider bolts, screws, and things like that to be incredibly easy to produce. Very easy, as a matter of fact. You can go to Home Depot here in America, or really any hardware shop in Europe, and grab yourself an entire box of bolts, nuts, screws, whatever you need. Maybe even some balls to give yourself a little bit of courage. But you can find any of that.
I was about to say, to be fair, the Russians have been looking for a pair of nuts for a long time. Like, they still haven't found them.
And they still haven't found us, but at least they're finding Japanese bolts. Maybe they can find themselves, like, some Chinese nuts from Balfank or something here soon, but nevertheless.
Oh, that's foul. That's foul. No.
Oh, no. But anyways, one thing that's actually shocking and really crazy to think about is that bolts are actually require a decent amount of machining and are actually something that historically were never cheap. It was all the way up until about the mid-1800s when industrialization really took off in the United Kingdom that nails were very expensive. Bolts were incredibly expensive, And screws were also very expensive as well, because the machining tolerances to be able to make those and the measuring requirements are actually incredibly strict. And you require a decent amount of high quality machines to be able to produce a large and consistent quantity of high quality bolts. And considering that the modern world revolves around interchangeable parts, bolts are incredibly important to a war effort in the modern world, really important to society as a whole, not in just the war effort, but for Russia as a nation. And the fact that they've run out of apparently suitable bolts, and now a part of the Russian war effort is sending kids out like it's World War II into the scrapyards to go try and find spare steel, this is starting to show us that the Russians may be running into finer detail logistical issues than we ever thought they could. Also, considering that they're not trying to buy Chinese ones, it is showing that, as usual, Chinese quality is very subpar. We've of course known that. Everyone knows that. It's the joke of the world. But when you're talking about finely milled machine parts like a bolt, that is something that you have to get in large quantities consistently. And the Chinese are probably not able to produce that quite well. And I know a lot of people are about to say, but Enforcer, the Chinese build these massive cities and they're all impressive looking and they're really neat and they have tons of apartment buildings, and it's all a lie. Because the Chinese don't build those apartment buildings for people to live in. I'm not even kidding. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's just true. They build them out of incredibly cheap components, incredibly poor skill construction-wise, and then they usually collapse within several years, and most of the time they're never even lived in. In fact, there was a huge thing that happened in the Chinese economy where their real estate bubble collapsed because a large, I believe it was an investment firm, ended up going under, and a lot of people had already pre-ordered apartments that never were finished and never would have been finished. A lot of the buildings had already been completed but never fitted out on the inside, because it was nothing more than just a way to try and boost the Chinese economy and Chinese numbers. And it ended up backfiring not only on the Chinese, but the investment firms that were doing it tremendously, causing a massive economic fallout. And it's one that the Chinese are still reeling with very quietly, even right now. And of course,
also, I saw Floss Tycoon point out in the live chase that it's called Tofu Dread Construction. That's actually exactly what it's called. And the concrete and all the materials are so poorly manufactured that it literally crumbles apart. I think it just takes a couple of years for it to start crumbling apart. It's that bad.
Yeah, it is very quick. Very, very quick. And that's something that I always find, just as a quick rabbit hole, very aggravating when people go, look at what the Chinese can do, or look at what the Russians can do. And I'll give credit to the Russians, usually, unless if it's occupied Ukraine, whenever they build anything, it actually is largely real, I guess is the best way to say it. But at the same time, they don't build a lot. Like, if you actually look at the new construction projects across all of the Russian Federation pre-war, it was a very small number. And the places that they would build up were incredibly small, like Moscow City, inside of the city of Moscow, right over here. This is the area that they built up to be ultra modern. It's about 10 square blocks. And when you zoom out to the entirety of Moscow, you can see it's literally just a speck. It's not like London or New York City, where the entire city is nothing but very high-end modern skyscrapers. It's a very small section because that's all they can actually afford as a nation to be able to build. But it still looks impressive enough on pictures, and it fools enough people where they go, oh, look at what Russia can do. They were first world, America's third world. But then with China, it's a bigger issue there with how people compare us to the Chinese. They always go, oh, look, the Chinese built like a city overnight. America ought to be like that. We ought to go back to the good old days. Well, the good old days in China are probably at least several dozen workplace fatalities on every single construction site using subpar construction equipment, never actually completing the buildings, and then they collapse within a few years. There's actual
Have you seen those, by the way? Have you seen those animation videos of the Chinese construction site, like accidents, the common ones?
Yes, I have, and they're
You
just
can watch those for hours.
Dude, they say there's a saying out there, it's an ancient Chinese proverb, that the biggest enemy of the Chinese construction worker is average industrial equipment, because they die in the weirdest ways on these work sites. Like, I'll explain one to y'all. Some guy was trying to get these giant concrete girders off the back of a truck. No, actually it was those concrete reinforcing tubes.
Rebar?
No, it was like those giant, those round like drainage caps that they have that are made of concrete. You know the ones I'm talking about?
Like a manhole cover?
No. I'm talking about those giant ones. You can stand in them, but they're like a concrete circle. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like a drainage pipe, I guess.
Yeah, kind of like that, but they're only like 4 feet deep. But they're pretty damn large in circumference. Anyways, the guy detaches it. It starts rolling off the side towards him. So instead of, like running away, he runs up to this giant ass 2-ton concrete circle and he tries to push it back up onto the truck. And y'all know what happened. It just rolled off onto the guy and quashed him. That was what actually happened. And there's like endless clips, real clips of that happening in China. I guess because of poor training for the construction crews. And also there are training videos that the Chinese have made telling people, hey, don't do stupid stuff. And I mean, like, that happens in America. OSHA's the thing, and people do stupid things here too. But the kind of stupid things that the Chinese do, it's like, man, you couldn't even find the dumbest construction worker in the United States doing something like that and ending up dying that way. You will just never see it. So, all that is to say, the Chinese aren't really the people you want to look for towards construction materials, or really anything for that matter, because it's all very low quality and it probably will not survive a very long time. I'm honestly surprised that Chinese high-speed rail has ended up functioning with so few issues, because it's kind of the outlier compared to every other kind of thing that the Chinese do. Hell, even the major industrial projects that the Chinese did in East Africa as a part of the Belt and Road Initiative are already running into problems. Just like the Three Gorges Dam is running into concrete setting issues, which have been a serious issue for several years, there's a major dam that was also built by the Chinese in Ethiopia that is already running into the exact same issues. Concrete setting issues due to poor training of the concrete laying teams, and they did not set the concrete properly. So it's having major foundational issues, and the dam is expected to have probably serious repercussions for the population that lives nearby if it's not drained properly. But anyways, all that to say, the Russians have no one to turn to for bolts. That's really what that whole rabbit hole was about. And now they're having to go and scrounge through landfills to try and find usable bolts. That is going to become a very serious problem for them going forward. Because while it seems like a small thing, think about how many things use bolts. Almost every single mechanical item in the world uses a bolt of some kind. And if you cannot have a steady stream of high-quality bolts, you are going to run into massive issues. Everything is going to break down very quickly, and you're going to have to continuously be putting these vehicles in the shop, and that's going to greatly increase the attrition rates of Russian forces on the front lines, especially on the vehicle end of things. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and all the way down south. I put this clip kind of in the general southern area of Russia because we know that wherever the Azov soldiers were taken, it was either in the Donetsk Oblast or it was in southern Russia near Rostov-on-Don or in between there in Volgograd. So we put the clip in the general area, but we got a very interesting video today from United 24 where they were able to talk to some Azov fighters from the Azovstal at the very beginning of the war that were taken prisoner. I might not be able to show y'all the whole clip, but I will try and show y'all as much of it as I can. And so, without further ado, here's the clip.
My name is Philip Malsan, and tonight we have a United 24 special for you. With me in the studio are Ilya Samoilenko, an intelligence officer of Azov, and Sergei Rochuk, a combat medic and also Azov soldier since 2015. Both men first participated in the heroic defense of the besieged city of Mariupol after the full-scale invasion of Russia in February 2022, and then held out for months in the Azovstal steelworks. On May 17th, following an ordered and collective surrender, both men, along with more than 2,000 others, were taken into Russian captivity. You were released from captivity in September 2022, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And you on the 6th of May 2023.
Yep, sir.
However, more than 650 members of Azov still remain in Russian captivity until this day. Do you have any information concerning their situation, or are they completely isolated?
Well, regarding the information that we have, these people are held in Russia, mostly, in different places, in different facilities, yeah, for the prisoners that they have. A lot of people know a lot about the conditions of Russian penitentiary system, yeah, and the best depiction of that might be the old Cold War era movies about the Gulag. Yeah, because it's basically the conditions that people are right now. For how much? 17 months for now? These people, they already suffered one winter in Russia, yeah, and the second winter is upcoming. They're in the different facilities and they are moving, but time by time, yeah, they are removing from one and they are placing to another. And each time when they change the exact facility where they are suffering more and more. Yeah, because new personnel, new shifts, the personnel they're providing their type of actions that they do normally for the POWs. Russians have a very specific relationship with Ukrainians, and most of all with Ukrainian patriots. To destroy our country and nation is the very great goal for the Russians, and they are trying to reach it with all types of efforts and actions that they have.
What can be done to bring them back?
Well, I know that our governments are trying their best in providing all of the exchanges that are happening. Yeah, but we haven't seen any exchanges of the prisoners of war since like probably Jedi's release. Yeah.
After the Redis release.
Well,
small group.
Yeah, small group. So it's very concerning situation that we have right now, because most of the people right now focused on the battlefield. Yeah, we also focused on the battlefield, and from our side is our type of solution of this problem is to take Russian prisoners, yeah, capture them on the front line, yeah, and create it, to boost up the exchange fund for the Ukrainian troops, to exchange our guys. Yeah, this is our part of the deal. We're trying to enforce the position of the government and, to make them do it better.
Is it possible for you to share a little bit about the conditions that you were kept in Russia? I mean, we heard from Gandalf the general politics or strategy behind how Russians treat prisoners of war, and how did you experience it personally?
I think that I'm sure that winter is the worst time for guys, because the heating effectiveness of these places is very low, so it's very cold there in the winter. I spent 2 months in a single room, just for one person. They call it karcer. And probably that was the the worst time in this prison, because it was freaking cold 24/7. And yeah, they also, as Gandalf said, they hate the patriot. The guys who have the patriotic tattoos is in the worstest situation there, because Russians became crazy about this. It's not the best place in the world, for sure.
When you say crazy, you mean torture, or?
Also, yep.
Do you feel that Russia is following a certain centralized strategy in regard to how they treat prisoners of war, or is it random? For example, different treatments between soldiers and officers, between Azov and non-Azov combatants?
Well, I might rather say it's not a strategy. The strategy is a different, separate culture. Yep, culture of torturing, culture of violence, and culture of pain. It's one of the, peculiar things, because like when you will see on the results of social quizzes, yeah, in Russia, yeah, how much hatred they have against us, against Europeans, against Americans, yeah, against all the free world. Yeah, a lot of people like in these quizzes, they expressing their ideas, like how they want to perform mass genocide, how they perform mass extinction of whole nations and populations. Yeah, it's bizarre, because like they think different. They think different.
Real quick,
they are proud of their.
To be fair about this, like, I do understand that there is a good portion of Russian population that really does truly feel that way about Ukrainians in the West. But I think the truth is, like, nobody can really answer survey questions, accurately or honestly in Russia, because if they answer honestly and they truly feel the West isn't the enemy, well, then those Russians become the enemy. Then they get locked up in the gulag. So, there are a lot of bad Russians out there, to be fair, but it's not the whole population. I mean, that fellow there was kind of having a false premise, trying to base his opinion off those surveys.
I would agree. It is a little tough to do polling in Russia, because probably a lot of people are scared of giving an honest answer. But at the same time, it's really all we can go off of, because the public is too scared to give an honest answer. then they're probably too scared to really do anything that would be anti-war anyways. They may as well just be complacently standing by and supporting the war just because they're too scared to stand up and speak their real mind.
Maybe so.
Perhaps. But also, I got to note, I really love the model railway that they set up around the interview, because if you all haven't noticed in the background, they've got this giant camera boom on a trolley spinning in circles. I mean, it's actually pretty impressive stuff film-wise, but nevertheless, I think we may cut this video short because it's at 6 minutes right now. It's actually an 18-minute long special. But of course, I got to give a huge shout out to United 24 and the great work that they do on their channel. You can, of course, check out this entire interview in its completion in the link in the description below on our map. It's right out here north of Volgograd inside of Russia. It's that marker right there. And you can find it because it says interview of an Azov prisoner. You go to it, click on it, and you can watch the whole thing from yourself, for yourself, start to finish. But it's time for us to start moving on out of Russia and on towards Ukraine itself, and to start talking about what we've been seeing on the front lines outside the left bank of the Dnipro River, and where the Russians are continuing to attack at Kherson, Avdiivka, as well as Kupiansk. We're seeing a lot of action. We're also seeing a decent amount of Russian losses captured on film again today, and we also have some pretty interesting frontline analysis to go through, and some talks about what may be going on. But before we do any of that, I've been asking y'all some questions in the chat, albeit very easy softball ones because the answers are very obvious, but we've been trying to make sure that we ask all of y'all a great deal of questions because I find it very interesting to gauge what y'all are thinking and what y'all are saying. And on top of that, we've been hearing a lot about what the Ukrainians may need to keep the war going. Of course, right now, the argument is really just, should Ukraine continue to be supported? And I know all of y'all will say yes, but right now at the moment, that is still a conversation that's being had here in the U.S. Congress, which is a little bit infuriating and very annoying, but at the same time, it is one that's going on. But beyond that, a lot of people are already looking into the future with a great deal of optimism and are assuming that support will continue and are starting to talk about what will probably be the most important thing to send to Ukraine once the support is reassured once again. And a lot of y'all have heard the statements from Zelensky that were recently made, where he said that air defense systems are probably some of the most important things that the Ukrainians could get going forward in the war. Probably a part of their defense in-depth doctrine of just trying to attrit Russian forces in their never-ending offensives and just sit back and let it happen. They're probably looking towards just protecting their general infrastructure in the rear lines instead of trying to dedicate more resources towards artillery, which would be an offensive means of trying to push the Russians out instead of just waiting out the inevitable end of the war. A lot of y'all have had an input on what Zelensky said, and Matthew actually has some very interesting statistics on what y'all thought about that question. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so moving into our first poll and question segment, we have one poll to address, and then after this one, I'm going to put up a second one because I see we started a bit of a debate about whether or not the entire Russian society truly believes that the West is actually evil, or they're simply suppressed and can't express their opinion. So, to address the current poll, the question is, Zelensky says Russia can be stopped, but Kyiv badly needs more air defense systems, and the question is, where's the aid? 64% said the West is temporarily stalled, 16% said the West doesn't want to support, 11% said the West isn't seeing good progress, and 9% said unsure. And on this one, it's a bit tricky because the West has said that it hasn't seen good progress, but I don't think that is the main motivation behind not sending the aid as much as Ukraine needs when they need it. I think the West is temporarily stalled. That would be my best guess. Honestly, though, my second best guess would be the West is getting tired of supporting Ukraine. I hate to say that, and you know, there are a political component to that, which we can't get into, but my hope is it's just temporarily stalled, and that is probably the case, and it looks like 64% actually agree with that, not just 64, a lot more than that, agree with that one. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I think that we are starting to see a little bit of fatigue. And I'm going to say this as well, because this is something that we've noticed on the YouTube end. At this point, I kind of go around every few weeks and I kind of check out what every other channel is doing, you know, viewership-wise, to see is the Ukraine war community as active as it was months ago, or is it not? Because that's a very good way to gauge how much of the public is openly invested on a daily basis on what's going on in Ukraine is how much viewership YouTubers are getting that are covering the war. And from what I'm seeing on YouTube, it looks like it is dropping off pretty drastically. On most channels, it appears that almost everyone has had nearly a 60 to 70% drop in viewership on nearly every other YouTube channel. I think we've had about a 15% drop, so way less than everyone else, but we are starting to notice that overall, it does seem like the Ukraine war community on YouTube is getting smaller, or the people who are paying attention is getting smaller. And there's some reasons for that. The mainstream news, which generally kind of spurs the public's interest, has moved on from Ukraine almost entirely. Very rarely is it mentioned. At this point, I think some people have been telling me, because, you know, I watch news channels here and there to try and see if they're still talking about it, but I still don't do that a lot. I think some people are saying that the only channel covering it now is Fox News, and of course y'all know that that's not in a positive light. It's pretty much only in a neutral or negative light that they cover the war in, but everyone else has moved on. That may be because ratings are dropping. It may actually be a natural move, because while I'm saying that the news may be the reason why people are forgetting about it because they're not reminding them about it daily, there's also a thing called retention. To explain a YouTube mechanic in a large society-wide term, there is such a thing as viewer retention. And the news companies may have been seeing that as they continued to cover the war, the viewer retention was dropping when they did it. People were just naturally paying attention less. And I gotta say, I gotta give credit to a lot of the pro-Ukraine community. They held on for nearly 2 years straight. Almost the whole community did, full strength, for almost 2 straight years. That's actually an incredibly long attention span for most people to have, and I gotta say, that's pretty impressive. But as their attention begins to wane, the news companies are going to move on to something that's a lot more pressing to the public and something they'll be more interested in. Here in the United States, that's the upcoming election. You know, of course, we don't get into politics, but I'm sure all of y'all do turn on the news, and that's all they talk about, is the candidates and what's going on in the elections. It's completely overshadowed everything. A nuclear bomb could go off in San Francisco tomorrow, and it would be a ticker tape at the bottom of the news. So going off of that, that may also be a moving factor as to why there isn't a massive movement to support Ukraine again, because everyone's moved on to the little piddly things here at home, like the elections, or, you know, their own domestic political pursuits, which honestly are pretty sad when you consider that there are lives at stake on the other side of the world, and also a massive amount of strategic implications that could come out of the end result of this war. Also, some of y'all have been hearing and seeing that YouTube is also starting to go around and censor war content. Gotta tell y'all that's been going on since the start, but now they're starting to try and get down on it a little bit even further, and maybe even come after pro-Ukraine channels, which supposedly may start happening in the next week, week and a half, who knows. But nevertheless, there's a lot that's kind of moving towards getting people not supporting the war that much, and I would have to say, it's very saddening. Of course, we're going to continue to support the war with all of y'all, and I hope that y'all stay here with us. But on top of that, I would have to say that air defense systems, getting back to what Zelensky said, is a very important thing for them to get. I would agree with Zelensky on that, but of course, we have to see support continue, and hopefully we'll start to see a resurgence of Ukraine as an important bit of news, but also there's something that Ukraine kind of has to do for that as well. And this is something that's going to be a little tough, because I know many people are going to be like, that sounds like it's throwing away Ukrainian lives. And it really isn't, but I'll have to explain why this is an important thing. The war on the news side of things is not as active as it was months ago. Months ago, there was always something big going on. There was the Southern Offensive, the Battle of Avdiivka. It was all major news, and there was always major things going on a near day-to-day basis. Nowadays, major things happen maybe every few weeks. And so the ability for the news to really talk about the war in Ukraine, because it's, you know, shocking, it's, you know, something that people will pay attention to, it is dropping a little bit. Because even tonight, when we go through the news, we're kind of doing the same thing we've done for weeks. You know, it's the war, it's war news, so we can't really change that. But, you know, we're going to be watching tanks get blown up, infantry getting hit by drones. It's really the same thing. It's not like at the beginning of the war when we saw, you know, the Black Sea Fleet getting attacked in Sevastopol, or the Ukrainians retaking Snake Island, or some major counteroffensive. I think what the Ukrainians may need to do, even if it isn't even practicable or successful, is conduct an offensive. regardless of where it is or, how successful it really is in reclaiming ground, they probably will need to conduct some kind of a major offensive, or at least an offensive, to get Ukraine back into the news circuit. Because the more the Ukrainians sit back in defensive posture and just go, you know what, we're just going to wait out the war until the Russians give up, that means people are going to move on. And we saw this way back in the day, back in 2014, when this all started as what they called the annexation of Crimea and the Donbass conflict. It was covered heavily in the news for about 4 months. Then the front line started to stabilize, and the news just dropped it. And nobody heard about Ukraine again until about 2022. Or if you were watching Vice News way back in the day, you were hearing about them all the way up until about 2016 or so. And then, Vice News took a bad turn, and then everybody ended up hating Vice News. But beyond that, that's kind of the world we're looking at right now. And I think it would be important, although it will cost Ukrainian lives, most likely, it will keep Ukraine in the public sphere of mind, where people will consider Ukraine and will consider it important to continue to support them, because they're actively trying to fight this war and end it. And when I say this, it kind of makes me think, not to rabbit hole a whole lot, but it kind of makes me think back to those generals in World War I, the ones that are looked at nowadays as raw idiots by most of the general public. But much like we are having to grapple with a situation now that Ukrainian soldiers may have to lay down their lives in an offensive that may not succeed, just to make sure that the fire in people's minds about the war in Ukraine continues to burn on, a lot of World War I generals also had that same mindset. They had to continue to try and push the Germans out of France, or the Germans had to continue pushing to Paris, so that way the war didn't just simmer on and just become this never-ending thing. The war had to end, and everyone had to put everything into it to try and get that done. And when you look at it from that perspective, you can rationalize and understand why World War I generals were conducting offensives that they knew clearly would never succeed. It wasn't about them succeeding, it was about putting in the maximum effort to show that the war was hopefully going to end soon. That was what it was really about, and also keeping it in the public mind for countries outside of Europe, like America, which everyone was kind of hoping would join from about 1915 onwards. But moving on out of all that's to say, the support needs to continue, and the Ukrainians need to make sure that not only is the public, being encouraged to keep involved in Ukraine, but there is something to pay attention to massively. I think that would be a big point. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our second poll, it says, do you think the majority of Russian society truly believes the West is evil and hopes for its destruction? 48% said yes, the majority believes that. 31% said, it's probably about 50-50. 17% said no, it's only a portion of Russian society. And 4% said unsure. And specifically, this question is asking whether or not Russian society truly believes the West is evil, and not whether or not they say that out loud, because, they really can't speak freely. Me personally, I would probably guess it's about 50-50. I really doubt that the people that are wearing Adidas and all these American, or not American, but Western brands are really truly against the West. But otherwise, why would they be wearing all of our stuff, like clothing? Why would they be buying our products? And why would they be so upset that Western companies are leaving their country when they did? If they hate the West so bad and it's so evil, and they're truly stuck in the Russian ways, then I don't think that would be the case. If they could speak freely, I'm sure that they would probably like to be a lot more like America, because who doesn't like freedom, unless you're brainwashed and full of, propaganda that you've been fed for decades. So, I don't think the majority believes that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I would actually have to largely agree with the 31% that said it's probably a 50-50. I would have a feeling it is probably a 50-50 split. That would be my honest opinion. Don't really have any good reason to explain that. It's just kind of my intuition, which is something I very rarely choose an answer on this channel. But I'd say it's probably a 50-50 in my opinion. So with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll to address, so we are moving on to our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a very generous $50 donation from guess who? BC Skyman. And he just said, that was a good point, Matt, and thank you very much, BC, for the compliment, and thank you very much for the support as well. He says, did you hear about Romania increasing their defense spending by 45%, and they are building a super army, an awesome job, Enforcers, and Slav Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the massive support, BC Skyman, and being one of those viewers that is helping this channel to keep running. And also, I did hear a little bit. I did not hear much about it though, but I did hear that the Romanians were increasing their military budget by about 50%. That's what I heard, but 45% is probably the exact number. That is pretty good. That's pretty impressive. It seems as though that is starting to become a trend for all the countries that are close to the EU and NATO frontier, is that they're starting to boost their military spending a lot. The Romanians really need to, in all honesty, because a lot of their military hardware is still Cold War vintage, and hopefully we'll get to see that they are able to upgrade their armed forces into a modern Western fighting force, a lot like what the Polish already have right now. But still, really cool to hear that they're upping their military spending as well, because I think that is absolutely incredible. And I would agree. They are hopefully going to build a super army, a lot like Poland's. Hopefully all of Europe will follow in that example, and we'll see that European militaries become some of the strongest and most powerful in the world for their size. But with that, I got to thank you so much once again for that massive amount of support. I got to thank you for saying that it's an awesome job, and I got to thank you for supporting it and helping it to make it possible. Y'all help us to get the Corgi Fund going. Y'all help us to get the Donut Fund going, the Law School Fund, the Rent Fund, the Light Fund. Y'all help us to keep all those funds running. And I got to thank you for that, BC Skyman. And of course, if you all enjoy the channel, you know, and you want to help it to keep running, you can always throw in a super chat. It's really the only way we support the channel, and YouTube takes 30% of it, but beyond that, we get to keep this thing running thanks to y'all support. And so, if you appreciate it, you know, and y'all want to, and y'all can, of course, please consider supporting the channel. It would help. But with that, thank you so much once again, BC Skyman, for the support. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Aaron Shu, who puts in a $25 donation. And thank you, Aaron Shu, very much for supporting the channel as well. And also, Aaron Shu's on Patreon as well. I just saw that a second ago. And thank you very much, Aaron, for both supports. He says, if the West truly wants Russia to become more West allied and or friendly, wouldn't sending the Red Cross or the UNICEF to provide basic amenities such as heat and or water to get the ball rolling for a regime change?
I would say, you know, it probably could, but I would say that the Red Cross doesn't really have that much sway. It's actually very rare for the Red Cross to come out and really do anything big, because the Red Cross got to go into North Korea during the Great Famine in the mid-90s, and nothing really came out of that. They kind of helped out a little bit and then left, but no regime change ever came around, and we've never really seen that those kinds of changes begin from that. Usually the kind of changes that really overthrow a government, at least in the modern world, is some kind of foreign intelligence meddling, kind of like the overthrow of the Iranian, well, the Persian government of the time, back in the 50s with the installation of the Shah, and, you know, of course, then the subsequent collapse of the Shah a few decades later, which also intelligence groups were involved in, along with, you know, the others. Anyways, that's a whole other rabbit hole, what happened in Iran. But overthrowing a government usually involves a little bit of external influence and also inside ebbs and flows, and usually severe economic turmoil. Usually whenever a country has a change of government, it is usually because of severe economic turmoil. That is one of the requirements. Like in Iran, for example, when the Shah was overthrown, Iran was going through an economically very rough time. We also saw that when the fall of the Russian Empire happened, that was at one of its worst moments during World War I. The collapse of the Soviet Union happened because of dire economic straits of the Soviet economy of the late 80s. We also saw that the French Revolution was because of dire economic straits due to droughts devastating the land and the French government not being wealthy enough to import grain from other countries and feed the starving masses, which led to them revolting. We've also seen that more radical U.S. governments have come in because of economic turmoil. I think the best example I could give pre-1960, because that's within the parameters of our no politics rule, would be the election of FDR as president. Because while a lot of people look at FDR as a good president now, back then his policies were actually considered fairly socialist and somewhat questionable. But that's kind of a requirement to overthrow a government, is that there has to be some kind of severe economic turmoil, and I think we'll have to get the Russians brewing up a little bit more for them to get into that severe state of economic turmoil where it'll be suitable enough for a government overthrow to happen. But with that, I gotta thank you so much for the support, Aaron Shu, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. Folks like you make it possible, and if it wasn't for you, where would we be right now? And thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the last one of this segment, and then we're going to be moving back into the news.
All right, and the last one of the segment goes to Justice for the World, who puts in a $22 donation. And thank you very much, Justice for the World. I believe that is your first ever super chat, if I'm not mistaken. And huge shout out to you for that and helping to keep this whole operation afloat and running. And sadly, they don't leave a comment, though. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, I got to thank you so much for the support. You didn't throw in a comment, but you did throw in a good deal of support. I got to thank you for that. I got to thank you for the Shiba Inu in samurai armor holding a trophy. Beautiful stuff. And I got to thank you for supporting this channel. Well,
show them that thing, you know, that marmot.
I was about to get around to that. But I would want to thank you so much, Justice, for the world, for helping this channel to keep running, because folks like you help to make it possible. And I cannot say that enough. And we, of course, always rely on viewer support. It is folks like y'all who help the channel to be possible. And so if you do enjoy the channel and appreciate it, you know, it would be nice, you know, to help it to keep running. And so thank you so much once again for that. And also, before we move on, Matthew brought up a good point. I was going to make sure to get around to it right at the end of that super chat, but y'all may know of a legend in the channel, Nutters HD, who's always been doing some really cool stuff in the background, picture-wise, animation-wise, all that kind of stuff. Tonight, we got a treat. Nutters HD sent us a cool little picture of our marmot, but it's Mott's life. Oh man, I like this thing. I love it, and very impressive. Oh hello, would you like a plum? But nevertheless, thank you so much.
I don't see anything. You're just looking at the map.
Oh
I
yeah,
see a thing.
because it's Discord. But nevertheless, I gotta thank Nutters HD for sending this incredible thing to us. It's a beautiful little thing, and I gotta say, we're going to make this an official emblem of the LSA at some point. It's not going to usurp the badger, though. We're going to keep the badger, but this is going to become another symbol, animal-wise, of the LSA. I gotta say, absolutely ballin', and I love it. Incredible stuff. Beautiful, beautiful. But moving on.
Hello there. Can I interest you in some rock? Would you like a piece of this rock right here? I got a good price. No haggle. Just you know, get the good stuff. You know, yeah, marmot.
Man, I went to buy a rock from him and he gave me plaster. But anyways, it's time for us to move on out of the question segment and on into our location unknowns. Starting off with our first clip, we got to see what Russian punishments look like. Ooh, that looks like punishment. And that also looks like punishment as well. Goodness me. Sleeping out in the open in the freezing cold. Pretty unfortunate stuff. Moving on from that, a little bit of location unknown news and on into our next one. We also got to hear that apparently, according to the British Ministry of Defense, incompetence in the Russian military is on the rise. I'm not even going to read this because I don't even think it's that shocking to hear. I think that's kind of what we all expected at this point. But once again, the British Ministry of Defense is just coming in and stating the obvious, so that way I can say that an official source said this and we're not just coming up with it out of nowhere. But nevertheless, we're moving on from that little bit of location unknown news and moving on to this odd thing here. This Ukrainian soldier was walking down a path and he spotted something interesting and picked it up. He's like, oh, what is this? He goes up to it, grabs it. Actually, he flicks it with his foot, grabs it, and picks it up. And you go, hey, that's kind of an odd-shaped thing. What the hell would that be? Well, y'all wouldn't believe it. That's actually a shaped charge fired from a tank, and it just didn't go off. So this guy is holding a live 125mm cartridge that could explode at any moment.
I wouldn't have gone and picked that up even if I didn't know what that was. That seemed like a bad idea.
I would agree. And we can see right here that they have a picture of this thing, and it's the PTM-3 shaped charge. So this thing is the real deal. The real deal shaped charge. This guy just went and picked it up. The guy almost won a Darwin Award for that one. And then he just chucks it on the ground.
Damn.
And then just walks on. I usually do not give Ukrainian soldiers heat for anything, but that right there, I don't know why anyone would pick up anything that looks like that, because one, it looks like a plastic explosive anyways, so why would you pick it up? And two, why would you handle it so carelessly? I mean, maybe it's just the front line getting to them and they just got tired and went to go see it. But still, I was like, why the hell would you pick that up? That was just dangerous because it's a live round. It's not, you know, like a landmine with the pressure plate pulled out. That thing is ready to go. If it lands the wrong way, it's going to probably explode. Or it may be completely faulty and not explode, but it's still dangerous to handle one like that. Moving on from that, though, we also got to see some Ukrainian soldiers enjoying their free time. The same song. The same one. Well, you see this guy just wandering around out in the fields as it's drizzling snow. And oh, it looks like he's about to do something. Oh, look at him go. Man, what an athlete. What an athlete right there. Skill, raw skill. And that's the end of that clip. Beautiful stuff. Fun to see that they're having a fun time. And moving on from that, we also got to see the Russian chemistry report over the last 24 hours.
Ooh. Oh, man, they got 3 Bob. Hey, look at Edward Brady coming in clutch, putting over there in the comments. 3 more for Matt. And we hadn't had a comment on the Kyiv Post in a good minute. Like, I'm glad to see it's back, Edward.
Man, I'm glad to see it's back, too. I love to see it. I love to see it. And thank you, Edward Brady, for doing that. But also, 3 for Matt. That is right. 3 Bobcat skid steers for Enforcer Matt. And not only that, the casualty report was not that bad today. 800 Russian soldiers knocked out, along with 13 armored personnel carriers, 23 supply trucks, 2 main battle tanks, 12 artillery pieces, 1 drone, 2 MLRSs, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. All in all, it was a pretty damn good day. And hopefully we'll get to see that these kinds of losses continue as the Ukrainians hold the line. And they certainly were holding the line today. Moving on up into the northern Kupiansk area, we got to see that Ukrainian forces were able to stop the Russians pretty much dead in their tracks, and not a lot of advances were made. Showing on the last 24 hours, we can see absolutely nothing has changed. Meanwhile, in the area around Tavlzhanka, we got to see that the Ukrainians were able to destroy 2 Russian main battle tanks with some very well-placed shots. We can see one of our Russian main battle tanks moving down the tree line right there towards the right side of the screen. And we can see it get hit dead on, knocking the tank out immediately. We now see a second tank also moving down the tree line. And we see it also got blown up. Oh, you now see what's actually a third tank right here getting hit and knocked out as well. And that's the end of that clip, but nice to see 3 main battle tanks taken out. Not 2, but 3 in the entire clip. Moving on to the next part, we also got to see some pictures of a Ukrainian Leopard near the front lines. Overall, I gotta say, pretty cool. It actually has a tarp over the turret. I don't know why, but still, interesting to see. This one's actually a part of the 4th Tank Brigade in the Kharkiv Oblast, somewhere in the area around Kupiansk. We don't really know much more than that. We didn't get a great look at the Leopard, but it looks like they're trying to repair something along the track assembly to keep the tank operational. Moving on from that little bit of news and a little bit further south, we also got to see another video of an M1A1, and it was rotating the turret. Rotating a little left, rotating a little center, rotating a little right, and a little shimmy here and there. Ooh, get him! We see them elevating and depressing the gun.
Oh man, I'm telling you. Oh man, I get no respect around here. I went up to the army. I said, hey, can I be a tanker? They said, yeah. You look about as depressed as the Abrams gun. Oh man, I'm telling you. I broke down right there. Oh man.
But we can still see the video end right there. And really nice to see the Ukrainians have Abrams near the front line. Moving on from that and down into our next clips, we also got to see that the Russians supposedly shot down the Baba Yaga, but like the caption states, there was no aftermath footage. We see them firing in the direction of it, but we cannot tell if it's taking that Baba Yaga down. See him pan the camera pretty violently, and we can see what appears to be the drone going down. We don't get aftermath footage beyond that, but to be quite honest with you, all seeing the smoke coming off the drone, I'm assuming that a motor may have been hit, but we don't know that for certain. But considering it plummeted like a rock, I'm not going to lie, considering that this thing did plummet like a rock right there, I'm assuming that it didn't recover right at the last minute. But still, that's the end of that clip right there, and moving on from that and on to our next one, we also got to see a martyr in the area got some upgrades. This thing has a little system right there. These 3-pronged antennas pointing out from the turret is actually an electronic warfare device meant to stop Russian FPV drones from being able to hit the APC and knock it out dead. It's pretty interesting. We haven't seen this thing in use yet, but hopefully we'll get to see this thing in operation somewhere and see how effective this radar jamming well, not radar, but EW jamming system really is. But moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next bit down near Kremenna, we also got to see in this direction a Russian tank getting hit by some cluster shells, filmed by none other than the Russians themselves. You see this man here riding on top of the tank. Oh my heavens!
My leg! My leg!
See him running away from the tank. See him kind of like aimlessly running through the woods. I don't think they have a clue what the hell they're doing right now.
Иди сюда. Ухо зацепило.
And that's the end of the clip, but showing us that apparently the Kremenna front is not doing that well. And the Frontline map also shows that too, because when we go all the way down to Kremenna and we look at what's going on down here, not a lot's changed. In fact, nothing's changed over 24 hours. I'm sure that that's not even shocking at this point. I don't think it's shocking at all to anybody that the Russians are once again not making any ground, but I have to make sure to show that because it's always important to remember these are Russian offensives, so if they're not making ground, the Ukrainians are winning that battle as of that day. Moving on down to the Bakhmut direction, we also got to see that the Russians were losing a lot of Scooby-Doo vans today, or as this caption called it, the loaf. Here it is. Here's the clip. All right. New music. But we can see the FPV coming down onto that Scooby-Doo van and knocking it out. And we also see another one. And another one. Oh, that was a minivan, actually. I guess that Russian's no longer soccer mom. Oh, man. I cracked myself up. But we can see the FPV drone going for targets all over the place. Some of these aren't even Scooby-Doo vans, they're just kind of normal minivans. And good night to you, Activista, and thank you so much for helping the channel to keep running.
Indeed, and I hope that headache clears up. I'm telling you, those headaches are a nightmare.
Oh yeah, they're bad. Real bad. Get some Advil. But we can see that FPV drone also hitting a minivan. And we see that one hitting a white Tahoe, it almost looks like. And Dante asked, what is the co-hanger for? From what I understand, it's to make sure that the drone doesn't bump into the truck and then flip over. It's to kind of make sure that the propellers are protected, so that way the actual charge hits the Scooby-Doo van like we see right here. Right on the roof.
Raggy, wrong.
Here we can see the Russian Scooby-Doo van bursting into flames and roasting in the middle of the fields of Ukraine. Some people say that this video is absolutely bitchin'. Others say that it is quite alright. I say...
Mono o mono.
I don't know what that means, but I say it's bitchin'.
But anyways, moving on from that clip and into our next one, we also got to see a Ukrainian just film a video near Bakhmut. Check it out. We got the babushka here. Just showing a little bit of what's going on behind the lines, which is nice to see. Moving on from that little bit of news in Bakhmut, of course, let me show you all the frontline analysis in Bakhmut. Oh, would you believe it? No frontline advances. Nothing's moving. Shocker. But moving on from the area of Bakhmut and further on down towards the Avdiivka direction, we also get to see that near Verkno-Turetsky, Mista S was destroyed and blew up in flames. Check it out. There's the Mista. And we see the drone coming on in towards the Mista about 9 different times. And finally, we can see it hit. And we see smoke coming from the Mista, and then a roaring flame. And probably a critical explosion. No critical explosion, but it certainly did burn out. So that is another destroyed Mista S. Very nice to see. Moving on from that and into our next clip near the area of Krasnoyarivka and Stepove, we also get to see that a Russian tank was blasted out here in this direction. This is the Russian T-72B3, abandoned to its fate as an FPV drone just scurries its way on into the commander's hatch. It went... it went right into it.
I thought it was a piece of paper.
Oh, no. That's a bomb. We can see the tanks now burning really beautifully and really impressively.
Man, this is like that show Hot Ones with that dude on YouTube.
That
so they went to Atomic Sauce.
Did you hear that Matt Pat quit?
Who's Matt Pat?
Okay, never mind then. I was like, I thought you knew who that was. Did you hear that Tom Scott's quitting?
Tom? Oh yeah, I did hear that.
Yeah, dude, so many YouTubers, big ones, because Matt Pat is the game theory guy, or the game theorist, and he has like 19 million subscribers. He just came out with a video, I think today, saying that he was quitting YouTube after 10 more videos, and he was just kind of moving on to other projects. I was like, dang, what do you know? I mean, crazy.
Tom Scott was a real loss. I hate to hear that one because I've been watching him for a long time. It seems like a lot of YouTubers, not just in the Ukraine war segment, but like just across the board, like there's got to be an extra like ulterior motive behind why they're quitting right now. I wonder if it has anything to do with like changes at YouTube or anything.
I don't know, man, because both of those guys have been on YouTube for like 10 straight years, which is kind of crazy though, because we've been on YouTube for 2 years now. Over 2 years, and it's weird to think about that because back when I started, their channels were both like 7.5 years old, and now mine's like 2.5. So it's about a quarter of the age of theirs when they both start retiring. That's weird to think about, actually, because like I always think that our channel is just like brand spanking new, but it actually has been around for a little bit. But anyways, getting on past the introspective moment, it's time for us to get on into our next clip showing some trenches near the Stepove area at Avdiivka. Check it out.
Як красиво. Іній, блядь. Сніг падає у нас тут на нулі.
Just a little look at what the area of Stepove looks like, and it's pretty tough up there at the moment. Moving on to our next and only other clip from the Avdiivka battlefield, we also got to see a rocket barrage being conducted on the Russians overnight. I'm going to have to mute this, copyright of course, but we can see here the area that's about to get rocketed. And here comes the rockets. You can see them on thermal. Just slamming into a wide area. It's what MLRSs do. It's what they're known for. And we see them still coming in. And with that, that's the end of that clip right there. Pretty nice to see the Ukrainians, of course, barraging Russian positions. And with that, we're now moving on down towards the direction of Pisky, where we also get to see a Russian T-80BV get destroyed. Also, Dante brought in a hot take. He said, Mr. Beastification ruined a lot of YouTube. I don't know.
He's right.
I don't know, man. You know, did it?
Nobody wants that commercial crap over and over and over. People want real personalities, not that fake, like manufactured commercial crap. Like not knocking Mr. Beast. He found a formula for success, but you know, you can only watch that for so long because you know it's fake. It's like it's all just like sitcom, like manufactured production.
Well, I mean that's what everything turns into. I mean, if you're at it long enough, that's what everything turns into. I gotta be honest though, like I think with Mr. Beast, I think the soul in the videos kind of died a few years ago, maybe a year or two
Yeah,
ago.
a long time ago.
Yeah, because it used to be very passionate. Like the videos weren't as well made as they are now, but you could tell there was a lot of passion behind them. Now it doesn't really seem like there's a lot of passion behind them. It just seems like there's a lot of effort put behind them. So I would agree that it's kind of gotten commercialized lately, but still I wouldn't dog on him that much. He is the most successful YouTuber out there in history, so he had to have done something right for himself at least. But moving on from that, now to Pisky, and further on down and into the southern front, specifically near Huilopol and Konstantinivka, we got to hear that some Serbian volunteers that had joined the Russian army are apparently not happy. When we asked to get anything apart from assault rifles and more ammo, they said we'll get it in combat. If you fight, you'll get it in combat. Almost all equipment we bought ourselves. For our own money. We don't mind. The dead don't need money, and we all want to survive. And if we are to die, we'd rather die with honor and dignity. Not like dogs. We're treated worse than convicts. None of us are crackies, alcoholics, and we all have traditional values. None of us sell hot dogs. We all have families and children, and we want to come back. To stay alive and help Russia, the Russian people. Oh, well, their loyalties are misplaced. And everyone living in Russia. Doesn't matter if it's Chechen, Dagestani. We asked to be moved to 4318 military unit. And we were told that proper officers and men serve there. Who will respect and work with us. We agree to all assignments today. We're morally ready. Our physical condition decreases every day, but morale is strong. We never surrender like Russians who never surrendered. The Serbs who came to fight, they're being mocked. In the 119th Regiment of the 106th Tula Division, they act like the Ukrainian army. Like the Ukrainian enlistment officers. They don't act like Russians. Putin allowed foreigners to come. Several of us Serbs set up acceptance of Serbs. We invite them, they come. A base was set up in one of the near Moscow towns. People from the town administration are helping there. Serbs there signed a contract with the MOD, the Ministry of Defense. Then go to Ryazan, and from there to Luhansk. There's now a number of Russians and Serbs there. The unit is called PSO Volk. They were treated poorly, called gypsies. Why did you come here? I'm talking about the 119th Regiment Command. They didn't treat them like people who came with good heart to fight, but came to steal and do God knows what. There was an order to go into an assault. The command of the 119th Regiment gave them 2 to 3 magazines of ammo and said, "Go assault now." The commander of the 119th said they can get more in combat. This morning, some military police came. Unclear if from the 119th or what. They came, fired in the air. It's dangerous to shoot inside dugouts, but they still did. They literally beat fighters with rifle butts who were unarmed. They literally smashed a few heads, hit them in their mouths. And then the video clip ends there, but I think we're getting a pretty good idea that apparently the Serbs are now regretting going and volunteering for the Russians. Who would have ever done that in their right mind? Nobody, but it looks like they're now learning their lesson and probably are regretting the decision. Maybe there'll be an example for other Serbs to not go and fight for the Russians. But moving on from that and towards Yakarivka, we also got to see a Challenger 2 moving around on one of the training fields in the south right there. I like the Challenger 2. I think it's a pretty good looking tank. I think y'all could agree. That thing's kind of stylish. It'd be styling on him. Ooh, get him. But moving on.
Oh, kill him.
oh, kill him. But moving on from that, we also got to see some Brazilian volunteers out near the Crim 1, and not only that, on Snake Island as well. Just nice to see them hanging out there doing their part, and good to know that there are volunteers from all around the world that are fighting for the right side of the war instead of those Serbian volunteers that are clearly fighting for the wrong side, and I think they found that out themselves. But with that, it is now time for us to move on up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 686 of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. It is a very long one, so I don't know if we're going to play all of it. We'll probably play about the first few minutes. Let me skip forward. Let me actually make sure we get to Zelensky's speech. Okay, here we go.
We want speech.
And here's the speech from President Zelensky.
Pėdai ir visai netrukus į Lietuvos žmonės kreipsis Ukrainos prezidentas Volodymyras Zelenskis. Pane prezidente, slovo vam.
Дуже дякую.
Labai ačiū.
Sveikinu tave, Vilnių. Sveikinu tave, Lietuvos tauta.
Well, I hate to tell you all this because I was waiting for him to start talking to see if it would give me an option to subtitle this. There are no subtitles and no dubs. So if we watch this speech, probably all of y'all, including me, because I still can't speak Ukrainian or understand much of it, are probably not going to be able to even understand what he's saying in the speech. So, also, by the way, this is in Vilnius, in Lithuania, just in case y'all are wondering. But sadly, I think we're going to have to skip the speech tonight because we don't have subtitles and we don't have a dub, so nobody's going to be able to understand what he's saying. So, with that, we're now going to be moving on from the speech, unfortunately, and on into the next segment of the stream, where we get to talk to all of y'all about everything y'all want to talk about. The polls, your questions, your super chats, and we get to thank the folks who are supporting the channel for helping it to keep running. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so moving into our final poll and question segment, our one poll that we have says, the U.S. says it will demand that Ukraine provide a more sharpened battle plan at the Davos summit, and what are your thoughts? 43% said that's reasonable for the USA to demand. 36% said, leave war planning to Ukraine. 12% said that's completely unreasonable. And 9% said unsure. And to me personally, I think that's perfectly reasonable for the USA to demand because, Ukraine is fighting the hardest, but at the same time, it's like an investor asking for a report. Like, what type of returns are we getting and things like that. And that's the way the U.S. Is approaching the entire situation around basically investing in Ukraine's defense, is they want to know if they're getting a return on that investment. To me, that is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, and Ukraine should be more than happy to provide a report and also to sharpen their battle plan as well, because if they are winning like they say they're winning, like we see on the videos and pictures, then it shouldn't be a problem whatsoever. But it seems like there might be a little bit of resistance going on, according to some articles I've read a moment ago, which is a little bit interesting. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it's a reasonable demand. In fact, it's the one that I just made on stream before that was even a poll. I think the Ukrainians need to have some kind of a sharp or concise plan to show that it is worthwhile to support Ukraine. Because, and this will sound a little crass, but I don't think the West wants the war to go on 9 years. I don't think anyone wants the war to go on 9 years, and certainly the West does not want to think about supporting Ukraine in tens of billions of dollars for about the next decade until the Russians eventually give up. I don't think that's what the West wants to do, and I think that's what the main push is, to see that they have some kind of a sharpened and honed battle plan to try and retake the territory and end the war quickly, because otherwise this could drag on for a very long time, and this could become a war that the West does not want to support. Even if they are pro-Ukrainian, they may not want to support it. So I would say that that is a reasonable demand, not only for that reason, but also because, the Ukrainians' plan was to retake all of their territory. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to now sit there and go, now we'll wait. Because with time, the Russians are only going to get stronger again, and then the Ukrainians will be in for it for a very long time. Not that the Russians will probably ever win. The worst thing that could happen is probably a draw, where the Russians just keep the territory that they possess right now. But at the same time, do we want that? And the answer is no. Nobody wants that. everyone wants to just make sure that, the Ukrainians are winning the war and actually pushing the Russians out, because that's what we're looking for. That's what everyone in Ukraine's looking for. So kind of sitting back and waiting is probably not a good idea. If they gave a sharpened battle plan and said, we actually have plans to try and push through the Russian lines and retake all of Ukraine's territory by the end of the next year or two, then I think it would be easy for everyone in the U.S. to say, yes, we should support them full on until the end, because the end's in sight. It's only another 2 years away. So with that, I hope that does address that quite well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that, we are fresh out of poll questions, so we're moving back into our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a very generous $50 donation from the Activista. And thank you very much, Activista, for that very generous support. And sadly, there is no comment to address on this one. And Activista has already left for the night, by the way, and we said goodbye earlier. So Activista is going to listen to this tomorrow. And once again, thank you very much for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Activista, and helping the channel to keep running. Folks like you help to make this thing possible. You didn't throw in a comment, but I did see that earlier you said you came in here just to support the channel, and then you were getting off to go to bed. So I hope you've had a good night's sleep while you're watching the stream tomorrow. And not only that, thank you for caring about the channel and supporting it. It's something that we've never brought up a lot over 2 years of running this channel, we say it all the time, but we don't really bring it up as to the importance of the channel's survival, that people support the channel. Because while everybody, and I have to say, it is truly incredible, even with what I'm about to say, it is truly incredible to watch this channel blow away fundraiser goals weekend after weekend and help out so much for Ukraine through those fundraisers. But at the same time, it is getting a little bit more pressing on our end, because while people are still supporting Ukraine and the fundraisers we run massively, support for the channel is starting to get, smaller. And while that's happening, back in the day when it started to get smaller, because this began nearly 5 months ago, when we started to notice that it was starting to drop, we were like, that's no big deal, because, it is what it is. We can keep the channel running. But now it's starting to get to the point where we are seriously wondering, if viewers just stop supporting the channel, how much longer could this thing go before we have to go and do something else? I'm not going to kid around with y'all. Living is not free. Just because we're covering a war, that does not mean we can be a good Samaritan and do things for free. We have bills to pay in the background. Everything is costly, much like you all know. And I got to thank you for the support, Activista, because you're helping us to make this channel possible and helping it to keep running. Because without folks like you, it wouldn't be possible. And hopefully, people will continue to support the channel, because as long as support continues, we will be able to keep this channel running. And, I hate to make it sound like we're holding the thing hostage, but at the same time, if I can't pay rent, there's not really a lot I can do war coverage-wise. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again, Activista, and thank you for helping the channel to keep on running, because folks like you help to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Justice for the World once again, who throws in another $22 donation. And thank you very much for that support once again. And he said, many tell, why is the West doing more? And are they aware of what the West has to do to provide them that support?
I would say that the West probably is, let me make sure I'm reading that question correctly. I need to go get that one, because the spreadsheet, of course, on my end isn't working. So let me make sure I can read that one exactly. So let's see here. If the West truly wants to become more West allied and or friendly, wouldn't say, oh, wait a minute, that's the wrong one.
I think this one was in the live chat, by the way, so I'll just read it again. They said, many tell, why is the West doing more, and are they aware of what the West has to do to provide them that support?
For some reason, Matthew, that question is throwing me for a loop. Can you reread that again?
So I think what he's saying is, let me decipher it myself. Let's see here. So I think they're saying that many people are wondering why the West isn't doing more to support Ukraine. And I think he's referencing maybe the European countries. I'm guessing that's really the only person he could be referencing, or the only entity.
And he's wanting to know if they're aware of what the West has to do to provide Ukraine that extra support. Are they really aware of that? Do they appreciate what we're giving Ukraine?
In some aspects, I'd say yes, they're appreciating it. In others, it seems like it was somewhat indifference, in some regards. And I think that may have been what soured some people, especially, because I'll say this, every once in a while, people do make mistakes. And when people make mistakes, especially on a diplomatic level, usually they're beat to death with the one mistake that they made. They could be perfect their entire career. One mistake will damn them. And every once in a while, there would be something of a bit of an unappreciative comment made by officials in the Ukrainian government that has been used and is still used by people who are anti-Ukraine to further the idea and grow the group of people who do not want to support Ukraine. That I can say. Beyond that, it also seems like Ukraine misunderstands who actually needs to be persuaded. Like, for example, right now we know that Zelensky is going to go talk with the World Economic Forum about getting more support to Ukraine. The World Economic Forum does not mean anything. The World Economic Forum does not have any power over literally anything at all. They're just a forum, and you're just able to go there and talk about whatever. It's like a TED Talk. It does not mean anything.
That's also, by the way, I gotta say, very unwise decision in my opinion to go to that conference because it carries with it a political connotation, and it happens to be that the party or the group of people that really does not want to support Ukraine at the moment, and that can change at any given minute. It's politics. It switches up pretty often. That group does not like that committee very well, that World Economic Forum. So with him going there to that is just further diminishing any chance of convincing that party or that group of people to change their mind and begin supporting Ukraine. That just makes it even much more harder.
And I would kind of agree with that as well. I think what would be important is if Zelensky wants to spend his time doing anything, it's probably a good idea to go here to America and talk to the Congress members that are the ones actually holding up the majority of the support, especially on the military end. The U.S. was the one providing the most support in that category, so it'd be very important to come over here and talk to the actual people who are going to be making those decisions. Because a lot of people misunderstand how world governance works. The UN has almost no power. The WEF doesn't matter at all. Who gives a damn about those people? Really, no organization matters. If you want support from America, the people you are going to have to talk to are the representatives and the senators in the Congress. If you cannot talk to them, or you do not understand that those are the people you're supposed to be talking to, support from America will probably not be forthcoming because the other groups have no impact or sway, and in fact may even have negative sway, especially on the group that they're trying to persuade support for Ukraine is good. So I would say that would be my answer to that live chat. And also, really quickly, I wanted to make sure to address this because this was a question from Mark Gagne. He said, will the fundraiser suffer if you can't pay the bills? Could you at least continue to do the Sunday fundraisers through loyalty to Ukraine? I'm not saying that we would end Sunday fundraisers because, we're not getting support enough on this end. What I'm saying is that we are going to run this channel for as long as possible, but if support to the channel, because we don't run ads or anything, and we never will, but if support to the channel just drops off and we aren't able to pay bills and we of course run out of cash, we have to go get a job because we can't start living for free because living isn't free. So the whole channel will pretty much just come to a stop at that point because I can't run fundraisers because the time I would usually use for a Sunday fundraiser, I'll be probably at a job at this time of night trying to work to make sure that I can pay bills. That's kind of the thing. It's not that the Sunday fundraiser is going to end and then we just run 6 days of, normal, streams where people can super chat. It's either, we can run the channel and it's supported, or it's not supported and the channel just ends because we aren't able to support it. That's kind of what, the issue is right now because we are, because this is, let me explain our view on this. I'm very hard set that we're never running ads on the streams because that kind of defeats the whole purpose of it. And also I think that's, kind of, scummy in a way. So we're never running ads on the stream. And, if the channel survives or not, it entirely depends on support to the channel. And so if we don't get support, then the channel just dies because apparently nobody really enjoyed it enough to, support it to keep on air, or at least not enough people did. And we weren't able to, keep ourselves running in the background. And some people, will say, oh, well, that's very callous. Well, if you're working at a job and you aren't able to pay your bills, and you have you have a brother that's also on the channel with you, and you also have a lot of things like law school and rent and car payments and stuff like that you have to take care of, it becomes very stressful. And when you do not have the ability to keep financing those things, your life comes to an end pretty much. So then you have to be able to find some way to be able to keep things going. That's kind of what I'm trying to say, and that's kind of the issue that we're running into right now, because and then on top of that, I feel bad saying that, because we appreciate everyone who's still supporting the channel and supports the channel to help it to keep running, but at the same time, it's it's getting really tough to run the channel on the book end of things. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that, we're moving on to our next one, which goes to Raynor, Slava Ukraine, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He says, take a question from the chat and have no clue how you guys manage to how you guys manage collage in this channel. I think he meant to say college, but it came out with collage. He says, respect to Matt and Andrew, and hello to Angry Penguin and Slava Ukraine, LSA #1.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, thank you for appreciating that. It is a lot of effort to go to law school and also do this, because we have to get up at 5 in the morning pretty much, and then we go all the way until about 12 o'clock and 1 at night. And then we go to sleep, and then we wake up the next day and do it again. It's a great deal of time every day, but more than happy to do it. And I got to thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Raynor, Slava Ukraini. And it is wonderful to have you back. And of course, LSA. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat goes to Little Bear, who says, didn't a heap of soldiers end up in a hospital from alcohol poisoning?
Yes. That is actually an endless issue across all of Russia. Russia actually has deaths from alcoholism, where people drink themselves to death at a very common rate. So that is actually true. That's been going on during the war, and that's going on inside of Russia just as a norm. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And real quick, a poll to address. It says, what is your opinion of the World Economic Forum that we were just talking about a moment ago? 54% said it's a clown show and a total waste. 21% said it's useful in its own way. 20% said unsure. And 5% said, it's really just harmless. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'm going to be uncensored on this one. The World Economic Forum is a complete clown show. It's a total waste. And it's a bunch of very arrogant, wealthy people that get together to sound like they're intelligent. And they come up with these harebrained ideas that shouldn't even be said out loud because they're so harebrained. And it's a total joke. And in my opinion, if any country's worth their salt, they wouldn't go anywhere near it. And anybody that wants to protect their integrity wouldn't go anywhere near it. And it's really just a clown show. And to me personally, I've never given it any credence. When I see them meeting, or I see headline news articles about it, I'll typically just ignore it because it's not worth the time. But Zelensky should not be going there, because Ukraine is a legitimate country. It's fighting for its survival. Why go give credence to a complete clown show? That doesn't make any sense to me. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm not going to lie. I would have to agree. The World Economic Forum is as useless as the UN. It doesn't mean any... Hell, I would say it's more useless than the UN. A lot of people put, I would say way too much into the World Economic Forum for what it is. It's literally Tech Talk Economics Forum, and also really weird. Y'all ever, I don't know. If y'all ever seen anything about the World Economic Forum, it's like a group of weirdos, pretty much, that just say goofy things, and then people take it way too seriously for what it is, which is just a group of weirdos talking about economics. So I would say it's really just a clown show and a total waste, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to go and talk to the World Economic Forum, because beyond them just going, oh, bravo, good speech, there's nothing coming out of it. There's better ways to use the time, like going and talking to the U.S. Congress, which is still hung up on Ukraine support. That probably would be an important group of people to talk to at the moment to try and, get support for Ukraine rolling again. So, hopefully, people get that. It looks like a majority of y'all think it's a total waste and a clown show. And I would have to say, I think y'all are dead on the money, because it's just lame. It's just dumb. I'm waiting for the comments to roll in, because I wanted to see what most of y'all are thinking. And it looks like a lot of y'all are on the same page. It's just stupid. Like, why talk to them? It's like talking to the UN. What's the UN going to do? Wag a finger? I mean, they're going to do nothing. Go talk to the countries, that actually matter. Go talk to the president of Poland, or the chancellor of Germany, or the president of France, or the prime minister of the UK, or the president of the United States, or the Congress of the United States. Go talk to Parliament in the UK. Or
also, you remember back when the chair or whoever it is that's in charge of the WEF made a statement saying that you'll own nothing and be happy. They're like pushing like communism, and it's just it's not a vehicle for democracy. It's like they have all these people meeting together that are from democratic countries, and then they meet and talk about how to basically tear down the democratic country that they just came from, that they just had a nice life in, and they go to this forum and decide they're going to try to tear the whole system down. It's like, isn't that like the top definition of a hypocrite?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it really is just a joke. And I see a lot of people coming in with like, did y'all ever hear of this and that, and eating the crickets and everything? Like, y'all, like, that stuff is just stupid crap talk. Like, is anyone eating crickets? No. Are they ever going to eat crickets because of the WEF? No. The WEF just says stupid things. They're a powerless organization that means literally nothing. They just say stupid, inflaming crap. I mean, it does make great headlines and news titles for some certain politically charged news organizations, because the crap they say is just so outlandish and stupid. Obviously, people are going to be like, what the hell did they say? And that's the only reason they've gotten credence, is because the news goes, look at these crazy people saying crazy crap. And then everyone goes, wow, these crazy people must have some authority because the news is talking about them. And they don't. They have no impact on anyone anywhere in the world. They just talk a lot, and that's it. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And I hope I get that across. If anything tonight, outside of the war, I want to get across to y'all the idea that the WEF is literally just the most useless thing ever, and it will never impact anyone in their daily lives. So if you're ever scared that the WEF is going to force you to eat crickets, I wouldn't be scared about that, because what are they going to, like, they're not the Congress, they're not the president, and they really have no sway over either of those groups either. So what are they going to do?
And also, if the World Economic Forum people are so smart, instead of focusing on these abstract issues that they like to focus on, like how to tear down these democratic countries that they live in, why don't they actually look at issues that they can actually fix, or at least attempt to fix, like solving world hunger and stuff? They don't go after issues that actually could be fixed, or they could work toward fixing. They go toward these issues that they have no hope in hell of ever really doing anything about. And I think that's on purpose too, because they really don't plan on really affecting change. They just say this crap to get attention. They have people show up, and then they donate to their organization, and it's really just a joke, really.
Yeah, it's a joke. It's stupid. Yeah, and I see some people saying, yeah, but there's crickets in, like some of the food. Actually, like, that's a bit of a misunderstanding, because some people are like, oh my God, they're putting crickets in the peanut butter. Actually, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, actually has had, throughout all history, a minimum amount of acceptable bug particulates and parts that are acceptable within a certain gram of peanut butter. And right now, I think that standard is around 7 to 8 pieces of insect remnants can be in a gram of peanut butter, and that's considered an acceptable standard at the moment. If it goes above that, then there's safety and quality issues in question on the FDA's end. But that's something that's kind of been normal. It's also, like, to also cover a few things that are also taken out of context, it seems annually now there's this conspiracy theory that comes up in the fall here in America, just to explain this one as well, that farmers are being paid to destroy their crops by the government, or being forced to destroy them so that way they can starve the public, which is untrue, because that's been going on since the 30s, because way back then, when the economy collapsed in the Great Depression, the farmers tried to bring their crops and their milk, specifically, the milk was the big one, to market to sell, and there was so much of it that everyone was trying to sell, and hardly anyone had anything to buy it with, that the value of the crops and the milk dropped so low that loads of farmers went bankrupt and just completely fell flat on their face. And so because of that, the president of the United States at the time, FDR, founded the Milk Board, which controls the minimum price at which milk can be sold, as well as the maximum price throughout the country, and set up milk districts for them and everything. And they also started to pay farmers to destroy crops annually at harvest time, so that way there wasn't so many crops that they would end up destroying the agricultural economy here in the US because there was just way too much food and the supply didn't even meet the demand because there's such an overabundance of it. So that's been going on annually. So, that also kind of gets me to laugh a little bit when people say, oh, they're starving us to death. It's like, no. This has been going on annually. Like, this is a normal thing. It's been normal for 70 to 80 years. But anyways, just wanted to make sure to address that one as well. But with that, hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to George A., who puts in a 20, along with Gerald Mansfield, who also puts in a 20. And then we have a 10 from Matt Cheer, and they don't put in any comments. But thank you, George, Gerald, and Matt, very much for that support and helping to keep us running. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank the lot of you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like y'all who helped to make this thing possible. And while y'all didn't throw in comments, the support is helping us to keep this thing rolling. I got to thank viewers like y'all who of course have the ability and appreciate the channel enough to support it and help it to keep rolling, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to be on air right now. And so thank you so much to all of y'all, all three of y'all once again. And of course, thank y'all for being a part of the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to VP the King, who throws in a $20 donation. And big shout out to you for that support. And it says, showing support from Florida. Glory to Ukraine.
Hey, and thank you for the support from Florida, VP the King. And thank you for showing some support down from the Sunshine State. Very interesting. Did you know that Florida is larger than Italy?
I did.
Yeah, pretty cool fact. I was like, wow, that's cool. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again. And Slava Ukraini. And thank you so much once again for being pro-Ukraine and a member of the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Jenna, who puts in a 20 and says, from the E4 Mafia and something Phil, that gopher.
Hey, thank you so much for the support and being from the E4 Mafia, Jenna. Great to know that we got folks from the E4 Mafia and Punxsutawney Phil. Maybe that's how you pronounce it, Punxsutawney. But still, thank you so much for the support, Jenna, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for pointing out our Marmot. Oh, hello there. Would you like a plum? But nevertheless, thank you so much once again. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you help to make it possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Green-Eyed Girl, who puts in a 10 and says, I have missed you all, and I was watching on TV, and I have a couple of questions. Comments on past streams. I watched many documentaries, and one was on the Chinese troop readiness. They washed out on UN duty, and the Chinese troops had no practical experience, and their aircraft carriers are falling apart. They seem to be paper tigers like Russia.
And I would agree with that, Green-Eyed Girl. Absolutely. The Chinese suck when they actually try and power project. There was this one time, to quickly cover that story, where Chinese peacekeeping forces were with a UN contingent in Central Africa. I think it was in South Sudan. A firefight occurred, and the Chinese communicated with nobody, ran out of their fob, and ended up taking on multiple wounded, while nobody else hardly got any wounded or any kind of combat casualties. The Chinese took on a massive amount for the contingent they took out because of poor communication, lack of training, and so on. They never really do that well when we actually see them out there in the world, and that would give us a pretty good idea that in a conventional war they probably wouldn't fare that well either. Also, I would say we missed you too. Where were you, Green-Eyed Girl? Where were you? But still, it's good to hear that you're watching on TV, and it's great to have you here in the live chat. Still, we will make sure to answer your questions as they come through, time and time, day after day. And I thank you so much for having a lot of questions lined up from all of the older streams. And also, those documentaries that you're watching about the Chinese, there are some great YouTube channels out there that talk in depth about the Chinese. Although they've been shadow banned at this point nearly, they're still pretty good for what they cover, and their content's very, very on point for what the situation is with China at the moment. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next ones go to James Dolan, who puts in a 10, as well as Thomas Kruger, who puts in a 5, along with Halligan 218, and also Mark Gagne, that puts in a 2. And huge shout out to you, Mark, Halligan, Thomas, and also James, for supporting the channel. They didn't leave comments either, but we do appreciate that support very much, because it does help to keep the whole news operation going strong.
And with that, we're moving on to our next one, which goes to Margaret Hemsley, who throws in a $30 donation. And huge shout out to you, Margaret, for that support as well. And Margaret says, a payday for the call fund. And take a live chat question, please.
And thank you so much for the support, Margaret, and thank you for helping the channel. And I got to thank you as well for being an old guard and helping this thing to keep running, because folks like you have helped us day in, day through and through. You're one of those folks like BC Skyman, who has been helping to support this channel on a near daily basis, and it means a lot to us because y'all are a big reason why we've been able to make this channel possible for so long, and we're able to hopefully keep making it possible with the Lee Spring Army behind us and supporting us all the way. And also, we will make sure to put that towards the car fund. And the reason why I brought that up earlier is because I brought it in for servicing and they said everything was wrong. And I was like, oh no. I was like, this is not good. And it's, now I got to figure that out. But still, thank you so much for the support, Margaret. And we will make sure to take a live chat question. So what do we got?
The live chat question goes to AF Kaplan, who says, is there any new information regarding the fate of Drasimov?
No, and I would say going off of that, considering there's no updates, I'm assuming he's alive at this point, because the Russians would have come out and said he's dead by this point, and they have not. And I know a lot of people are like, no, the Russians wouldn't say that. They would. Like, even though the Russians are, you know, liars through and through, they lie through their teeth, they would have to come out and admit that that guy's dead, because there's no way to hide that. He's such a high-level commander in the Russian military that if he died, everyone would be talking about he's missing, he's not issuing orders. You know, the hell, the military would be in shambles because no one would be in his position. So he is certainly not dead at the moment. I can guarantee y'all that. And that's probably why we haven't heard any follow-up news. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one. Thank you for sponsoring that live chat.
All right, and the live chat question we already got. So with that, we are moving on to our next super chat question, which goes to Doug, who puts in a $20 donation. And huge shout out to you, Doug, and thank you very much for that support. He has Christmas has me tight on cash. And he says, we won't let you guys go. And take one from the chat. And thank you from Chicago, Illinois. I would love a plum.
I don't know. Would you like a plum? And thank you so much for the support, Doug. I love the profile picture. And also, that's another thing that weighs on me too, is that I said we would never beg for support, and I hate even bringing up that the channel's starting to run into rough times. I feel, we should say that so that way, one day y'all don't just wake up to a video 2 months down the road and it's me saying goodbye YouTube, and we kind of, tell everyone, it's starting to get rough. We don't know how much longer we can keep it running, but at the same time, I hate putting pressure on viewers to make y'all feel like y'all have to support the channel, because if y'all don't find it good enough to support, or y'all can't support it, and then, we can't do this as a job, everything just kind of comes together, and that's that. And it is what it is. And to be honest with y'all, I don't really say this a lot, but as I kid around a lot on stream and everyone always well, not everyone, but, the reverb? Hello? Hello? Matthew?
Can you hear me?
Okay, I can. Something go wrong over there?
Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
I can. Something go wrong over there?
Okay, I can hear you now. For some reason, my headphones are messing up. But anyways, I think they're back.
Huh, that's weird. But anyways, at the same time, I hate to even bring it up, because then I feel like I'm putting pressure on y'all to support the channel, and maybe y'all have the ability to support and y'all just don't want to support, or, and this is the more likely option, folks just can't support because, like you said, it is right after Christmas, and it's probably tough for folks to support. And that's one thing that also weighs on me as well, and it makes me hate to even bring up that the channel's having a rough time. So, and honestly, we don't really want to do that either, because, if the support just, doesn't come to the channel, we can't keep the thing running. That just is what it is. It's out of our control. We're never running an ad, and so if the channel can't run, it just can't run. So we're, beyond like the few times I brought it up, like last night and today, that's probably all we're ever going to bring it up, because I hate to know that we're kind of making folks feel pressured that, the channel's being held hostage or something. But beyond that, I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping the channel to keep running, because the support like that does help to make this thing possible. And we will make sure to take one from the chat. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this thing to keep on running. And we will get you a plum and a live chat. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next one here, we have a $10 super chat from Cynical1, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He says, you guys are all right, and I like your dedication to what you're doing, and keep on keeping on, and keep it up from Mississippi.
Hey, thank you so much. Was that another super chat, Matthew?
It was.
Well, we were supposed to get a live chat, oh boy.
We shall grab it next.
I thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep running. And of course, thank you so much for the kind words as well, all the way from the Mississippi, because that's right next door to us, and we've been to Mississippi a load of times. But still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you help to make it possible. And so with that, now let's get to the live chat.
And the live chat goes to Sandy, who says, did you hear about the Battle of the Red Sea?
The Battle of the Red Sea. Yes, I did, and I believe that was with the Type 45 Daring class frigate today, as well as the Carney, which is also a U.S. destroyer. So yes, we have been hearing about that, but I haven't been covering it a lot because it's kind of a low-intensity battle that's going on with the Houthis as far as the drone-to-ship warfare has been going. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat, Doug, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to William Jones, who puts in a 10. Thank you very much, William, for that support, and he does not leave a comment. Also, I thought I had another one that didn't have a comment, but I don't. But thank you very much, William, for that support. And we also have a 10 from Halligan218. And thank you very much as well. They said, for the Plum Fund, and need to keep the marmot fed. And thank you guys for what you do.
And thank you so much, Halligan218, for the support. And thank you for supporting the Plum Fund. We love our plums, and of course, we love our absolutely ballin' marmots right there. Oh, hello there. Would you like a plum? And thank you so much for supporting our Plum Fund. We will keep the marmot fat and goofy looking for everyone's enjoyment. And thank you for helping this channel to keep running too. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Mr. Lunchtime, who puts in a 5, and he says, Mr. Lunchtime with the donuts. He says, would like to sponsor a question from the chat, and great work, guys, and stay toasty, my friends.
And thank you so much, Mr. Lunchtime. Also lunchtime. And thank you so much once again for supporting the Lunch Fund. And we will make sure to get a question from the chat, and we are staying toasty. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to Marietchin, who says, what kind of rockets does the Patriot use, and can those rockets be made in Ukraine?
No, those rockets could not be made in Ukraine. They use the MEM-104 Patriot missiles, and there's 3 different block variants of that missile. All of those are manufactured here in the United States, and would have to be shipped over to Ukraine. The Ukrainians would probably never have the technological or industrial expertise, at least within the time span of the remainder of this war, to ever be able to produce a Patriot. It probably would take them so much time to get a factory up and running with trained personnel that could produce these missiles that the war probably would have ended by the point they ever rolled the first one out. So, to be honest, I would say within the scope of this war, they probably could not do that. But over time, over the next decade, they probably could easily manage to pull that off. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much once again for support and sponsoring that live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And a big shout out to Teslans, who puts in a 2, and also a big shout out to that guy who puts in a 5 and says, I'm standing up a new PC.
And thank you so much for standing up a new PC. And I hope you're having fun with that, because new PCs are nice, and I hope that one's a good one. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that, we're moving on to our live chat questions. And obviously, up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight, we had Earl Bernew. And we also had, not the whole roster tonight, but I can't recall exactly who it was that put it in, except for Earl Bernew. And I think Mark Hodges also popped in along with Cliff Simonson. And I believe maybe Paul Schultz. If I missed you, let me know and I will give you credit before we end the stream tonight. But that's all I saw thus far. And they said, good evening, gents. And this evening's CW message is as follows. The LSA will keep going with every ounce of strength we have until the war ends, and long live the LSA.
And that's the sound of money. And y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate for y'all for that. That's pretty impressive that y'all got the Morse code message correct on the 686th day of the war. And here's to another 686 if need be. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on into the rest of the live chats. We're going to be answering 3 of them due to time constraints, and then we're going to be rounding out the stream. And so with that, we're on to the first one.
And the first one goes to Keith Rule, who says, do the drone operators have maps showing the most vulnerable parts of the Russian equipment?
I think they do, or they kind of have learned it in training, one or the other. But I have a feeling, knowing how militaries work, they probably have a chart out there somewhere that actually tells them where the weak points are that they need to target with the drone. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one is a super chat from that guy once again who puts in another 10, and thank you very much. He says, never underestimate Ukraine or Dmytro Antonov.
And I would never underestimate Ukraine. And I would never underestimate Dmytro Antonov, which I think is the guy who founded Antonov, or was one of the main designers in Antonov. You know, the guy the company's named after. But still, thank you so much for the support. That guy, because you are that guy, pal. Trust me, you're that guy. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And we'll never underestimate Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Anonymous. He says, do you believe that Putin has contributed behind the scenes to other conflicts around the world?
I think he may have in a few instances, like in Syria, for example, clearly, and maybe in between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We know that the Russians did broker that peace, so there was clear Russian involvement, but I don't know if he like fostered what happened with the war. I think that was more of like an ethnic thing around Nagorno-Karabakh, which is kind of separate from the Russians and didn't really require a lot of poking on their end. But Syria, certainly. And in Sudan, no question. In those two areas, there's clear Russian influence, and they kind of led to the conflict that happened there, in a way. So I would say with those, yes. Other areas, not so much, because Russian influence is not as grand and wide-reaching as many people think it is. It's actually very weak. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Carl Elwell, who says, have you all heard of the intelligence coup the SBU made in getting their hands on blueprints for electronic warfare? It's approximately 199 G of data.
I did not hear about that. And that is very interesting. I wonder who, I'm guessing they may have gotten it from the Russians. And if that's so, good job on them. And I'll have to look into that a little bit more and see if I can find out something about it. But still, pretty interesting to hear. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you for throwing in a little tidbit of news while we're ending out the news stream. And with that, that was the final question of the night right there. I got to thank everyone so much once again for watching. If y'all did enjoy, hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to let your friends and family know about the stream. I got to thank everyone once again who supported the channel tonight to help it to keep running. Y'all are the only way we were able to keep everything running behind the scenes. Fund-wise, Corgi Fund, Car Fund, all that stuff to keep this thing rolling, along with the Plum Fund and the Marmot Fund. And I got to thank everyone once again so much for watching, every single one of y'all, whether y'all supported or not. And so with that, good night, good luck, stay safe, take care, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Least Spring Army. The Least Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. We'll see you all tomorrow. Get you some rest. Slava Ukraine, Hiram Slava, and of course, as always, good night.
Yes. The Least Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
And really quickly, I'd also like to thank Tom Lunge, or Tom Long, for the support, the $10 super chat. Thank you so much once again, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And of course, to all of y'all, have a great night, take care, and Slava Ukraini.